Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters of the Week video. I thought I would mix this one in here while I'm continuing to wrap up your aliens and UFO suggestions. Please keep them coming. I'm going to do just a few more here, then give this playlist a rest, and then start focusing on another one here. So this suggestion actually comes from a random cryptid generator. It's a neat little website that just spits out names, and whatever is there, then I'll talk about, unless I've mentioned something about it before. I thought I did in this case, but no, it turns out I never really talked about this creature. It's yet another lake monster. I know there's big fans of those out there here on the channel involving those giant lake Loch Ness type monsters, so you're in for a treat. And then, at least based on the number of eyewitness reports, this is quite possibly one of the most seen cryptids yet. It's numbering in the hundreds. More on that here in a minute, and I'm gonna pick and choose a few that stood out here. But you're looking at a representation of it now. It has two names that it goes by. One is called the Selijordsormen. Hope I'm saying that correctly. Selijordsormen. And the other one is Selma. For convenience sake and make things easier, I'm just going to go ahead and go with Selma for this video. So let's go ahead and let's talk about this monster here. And then I'd love to hear what your own thoughts and comments are with regards to this, especially again on the local level. So what is this Selma lake monster? Well, it's a creature that's found in Telemark, Norway, specifically at a lake called Selijordsormen. Hope I'm saying that correctly too. Selijordsormen, which is an area there that's about 12 miles long, isolated. It definitely has a bunch of water in there. It's formed by glaciers and so on. So this location houses either just one creature, or more likely multiple creatures, because there's been various sizes associated with them. In fact, let's go ahead and let's talk about the actual descriptions of the creature itself. So again, it varies when it comes to it, but one of the most detailed ones involved an encounter with a man. He described this creature as follows. It's a large serpent-like monster, and in some cases it's considered more along the lines of a snake. It has these bumps on the back of it as well. Maybe these bumps are just part of some kind of fins or some other type of appendage, and it's pretty large. You're looking at something that is about 15 to 20 meters long, with a head that's been described as being at least 10 foot tall or more. And the head itself is actually something that resembles more on the lines of a crocodile. And then the body itself has either scales or a smooth like skin, the kind that you would again imagine something along the lines of something just wading through the waters, perfectly made, in other words, to be able to do so. Its color is more on the darker tone, involving blackish hues. And in some cases, it's either described as having an entire snake-like body, in other words, no legs, no feet, and in other indications, it has more on the lines of fin-like feet and more that's right below its neck. Interesting, though, about one other thing about its characteristics, it was stated that it has no eyes and maybe even no mouth, or maybe the mouth itself is, when it's closed, barely visible. But at least as far as the eyes being gone, that's interesting, because the user had mentioned that they saw it and then it saw it move its head from side to side, maybe as if it was listening, using some kind of echolocation or something else to be able to find out what's happening. And it could make more sense on there, because you would imagine if a lake like this, go to the deeper, darker parts, there's going to be hardly any light. This creature would be able to adapt to something along those lines. But some of the other encounters mention it having a much smaller appearance, to the point that it's almost like they're on the top of the lake by resting by some of the stones or some of the dirt pathways around there. And in other cases, it's much, much larger. So who knows? Maybe it's one that's just small at first and then started to grow, or maybe there's a family, if you could call it that, of these Selmas, and then this creature is essentially living there along with its other kin, and it's been doing so for quite some time. In fact, apparently it's been there for several hundred years, and that's at least of the earliest known reported encounters, there's the indication that it could have been there far, far longer before. Some of the earliest ones, in fact, go back to the 1750s. So you can imagine something along those lines when it comes to it having almost 300 years of such encounters. And then some of the more documented ones started in the late 1800s. In fact, let's talk about that, the ones going there into the 1900s specifically. In 1918, there, in the summer specifically of that year, there was a gentleman by the name of Carl Carlson who was there by the bridge, there by the lake, and he was going to try his luck at fishing. And as he was doing so, he stated he saw a quote unquote strange animal that suddenly started closing in fast on him. In fact, the idea was that it just happened so suddenly that he was just reacting at that point. And so it got so close to his area that he just threw everything away, fishing rod and so on, and then just point out blank ran. And when that happened, that's when he described it having a head. Again, you have to consider that this was something very quick. He probably only had a couple of seconds at most, but he described it as more on the lines of a horse. And then when it was about just 3 feet away, that's when it all of a sudden just stopped. Oh, I'm sorry. When it was about 3 feet outside of the water and in his distance, about 150 feet away, that's when it stopped and then just decided to go back into the lake itself. And so it disappeared. And this guy, Carl Carlson, never saw it again. And then another interesting indication is that maybe there are multitudes of them. Maybe they're fighting amongst one another, because that same year, there was another person named Torgel Begorge, and they stated they found large meat-like chunks that were floating right there on the lake. So either one of two things could have happened. Either they were infighting, these Selmas, between one another, and there was a loser, and then that loser essentially was ripped apart during the fight, or one of them ended up dying, and then other animals that were there, let's say either by the lake or in the lake itself, started picking on it, and then that's where those chunks come from. So that's at least one indication. The key thing is it did not look like anything resembling any of the other animals that are there. Another user stated they saw this creature over by the beach area, but it was too quick. It quickly vanished into a set of stones. Another user, one by the name of Evan Fajotson, stated that when they went out to fish, they saw a quote-unquote strange animal out by the lakes or by the cliffs area. But again, this creature is very shy. It's to the point where it's almost like when it recognizes that it's being seen, it just disappears. Such was the case here when it quickly slipped down back into the water itself. And then another encounter, one that was hopeful, was this. Then in August of 2000, there was a team that decided they were going to go to that lake and they were going to try to catch a live specimen. Talk about gumption, right? When it comes to that, imagine something like that and being successful at it. This would have made worldwide news immediately, even back then when there was hardly any kind of internet and so on. But yeah, the way this occurred was they developed a trap, something that was called Comet, which stood for Cooperative Monster Eel Trap. It was specifically designed to capture something that was larger than usual, because this thing was itself 18 feet long and 15 wide in circumference. And they had live fish that they were going to use as bait. And so they planted it there. They planted it in that lake, waiting, trying to see if something would occur. If it wasn't going to be the big one itself or the larger ones, they were at least hopeful that they were going to catch a juvenile. But lo and behold, it turns out it did not happen. Their plans of being able to capture something, take some DNA, and then also see what they can do with their analysis, and interestingly enough, place it back into the wild. None of that came to fruition because the trap never went off. And so it came up back empty, but there were some apparent interesting sonar readings there during that trip. Could those sonar readings be actual stuff associated with the Selmas? It's hard to say, but at the same time, there's all this other evidence in terms of eyewitness reports that keep pointing to something along those lines. No word yet as far as like something else big in terms of an expedition happening like this afterward. Although there are apparently expeditions, smaller ones, that happen on a year-by-year basis. So who knows, maybe somebody one day might finally be able to capture not just like video or like solid video evidence, but an actual Selma itself. But pretty much that's all the information that I can present here. There's plenty of more encounters to talk about. But they just go about in a similar manner of people seeing them and then this thing essentially just disappearing right back into the water. But if anyone has more info on a local level, please post those comments below. It's to the point where, as you saw, there's like a dangerous sea serpent sign out there. So definitely there in that lake, it's popular enough that people go visit it. And when they do so, who knows, they might have a good chance of being able to encounter it. If someone does out there and knows more on a personal experience level, post it below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.